Our next guest is from Americans for Limited Government. He's here today to talk about Obamacare and where the governors stand on it. I want to welcome Rick Manning, once again, from Americans for Limited Government, onto the George Jarkesy Show.
Thanks for having me, George. How you doing today?
Good. But, a lot of confusion around sort of where Obamacare goes now that Obama's been reelected.
Well, there is, and now we're in the implementation phase. And one of the flaws in the writing of the law is the federal government left a lot of the implementation up to the states, and really gave the states the power to decide if Obamacare gets implemented or not. And so what's happening is we're having a debate right now nationwide about whether or not states should implement something called a health insurance exchange. And what this is it's really a twofold kind of bureaucracy. One is they create a website with all the different health insurance options for state residents, which is pretty benign, but there's a lot of cost involved. The second part of it is the people who are appointed to be that health insurance exchange will have the enforcement power over businesses who have complaints against them for not following the law.
So you're talking about setting up 50 new compliance agencies around the country, another layer of bureaucracy?
Absolutely. And so what a lot of these states
with the power to squeeze small business.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And not only the power, but the responsibility to. And so here's what a lot of governors have decided. 20 governors across the nation have said, no, we're not doing that. There is a backup provision where the federal government then puts in the health exchange and has that capacity to put the website together in terms of alternative health care options. But when they wrote the law, they messed up, and they didn't give the federal government the power to enforce the law against employers. And so as a result of that, if the federal government health exchange goes into place and the state rejects it, at that point, the federal government really under the law doesn't have the power to enforce it. The IRS is attempting to write regulations, in fact, has written regulations that grabs that power for the federal government, but those regulations go well beyond the statute, and it would be somebody of small business, medium-sized business in a state would be able to then say, no, you don't have the power to do that. We'll be able to fight them in court. And because they're going beyond statutory authority, there's a reasonable chance that they would lose. The federal government would lose, and as a result, one of the major underpinnings of Obamacare would be eliminated.
Wow. Are you telling me that this small business is going to have to sue the federal government? It's unbelievable. The circumventing and the creativeness to try to tax people and to try to force them to do things is amazing to me. Now, according to your newest chart, which is a state health insurance exchange decision chart that you put out today, you had 11 states undecided.
Correct.
When are they going to throw their, where are they going to fall?
Well, the Obama administration had put a deadline of the 18th, November 16th as the original deadline. And they discovered that nobody was a lot of states weren't doing health exchanges, and told them, unless you get us some answers on what these look like and what we have to do and what our cost problems are, we're all going to opt to not do it. And so the Obama administration moved the deadline back to December 12th, and presumably are going to get some more information to those states. 20 states have said no already, that they're not doing it. 11 states are undecided, and then the remainder, the 19 who are the remainder, have said they are doing it. So you're really looking at a split in this country about where these state exchanges are going to exist or not. And given the advantages of not having a state exchange, those states which don't have it, with the possibility that Obamacare's employer mandate will be undermined in those states, will have a dramatic economic advantage over states that have chosen to do a state exchange.
Wow, that seems like the rest of the governors would jump on that. The thing is aren't we glad that Pelosi didn't read it?
Well, that's the whole point.
She passed it, and she passed it to find out what's in it. Now she's finding out what's in it.
Well, and that's exactly right. It is exactly the point. They passed this thing, they crammed it down everybody's throat, and now that they're reading it, they're scrambling around trying to write regulations to fix it. And that's not the way our system of government is supposed to work. If you specifically don't don't allow for the federal government to enforce something, and you leave it up to the states, well, that's kind of they have to go back to Congress to fix that. And what we're advocating is that the House of Representatives put a rider on any kind of bill that comes out of this lame duck session that prohibits the IRS from enforcing the federal health exchanges, and just makes it very clear that if you're in a federal exchange, the employer mandate cannot be enforced. And that if the House of Representatives actually stands up and does what they're supposed to do under the Constitution, they can put an end to this in a big old hurry, and that's what we're urging them to do.
Well, good. I hope that. I mean, it has been called by many, it's a taxation without representation. Let me just ask you, as long as you bring up Congress real quick, why is it that, couldn't Congress just cut funding for Obamacare? I mean, we've got the ceiling coming up. We've got negotiations. We still are. Today, every day I start my show off, as you know, Rick, today's the 1,301st day that the United States operated without a budget.
Right.
At some point, they're going to want to pass a budget. Couldn't they just pull the funding on Obamacare?
Well, the House of Representatives has attempted that, and in every instance, we end up with the Senate saying no, the president threatening to shut down the government, and the House going along with the Senate and the president in terms of continuing to fund Obamacare. But
I think it's time to have it out, don't you?
I think, yeah, and one of the key things on this is one of those ones. If they want to shut down the government over whether the IRS can take extra legal authorization and create extra legal regulations to enforce Obamacare against employers in 2014, well, if they want to shut down the government over that, I'll have that fight every day. Let's fight about the IRS power and whether the IRS should be able to do that. We win that fight every single time from a limited government perspective.
Well, not only that, but that was supposed to be a $600 to $700 billion program, is now running up to $600 to $700 billion. Now it's running up over $1 trillion to implement that program in the next. 1.8 trillion is the last number I saw. The fact of the matter is it's like everything else in a socialist agenda. And look, the economy didn't help out. So taxes aren't, revenue's not good. But it's interesting. We were, and I don't want to include me in this, but there was a lot of complaining last year about, the standoff, and we got nowhere. But I'm going to tell you, more and more, Greenspan made this case, Paulson made this case, and now, there's a guy, Martin Hutchinson, who's a global investment strategist over at Money Morning, have all made this case that, hey, you know what? This fiscal cliff is going to actually make us take our medicine like we should have, and actually gets us back a step to free markets. And so there's a lot of argument that's starting to gain. It's, hey, at least we're cutting spending.
Well, and you look at the fiscal cliff, and it's really, I did an article on this that's published today. It divides.
Hey, Rick, we're going to have to hold you over to the break. Just stay with us right now. We've got Rick Manning with us. Do not touch that dial. We're talking Obamacare. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the George Jarkesy Show. There is 1,540 days left until Obama leaves office. Yes, we reset that countdown, but it is counting down. You want to reach me? You can get me on my Twitter handle. It's at Jarkesy, Jarkesy, or you can call into the show, 855-943-6743. Right now, we've got Rick Manning on with us, and he's from Americans for Limited Government. We've been talking about Obamacare and how the governors, in their best interest, financial interest of their states, are opting to not enter the exchange program and to let the federal government control the exchange program. And so that's what we were what we caught before the break. Rick, thanks for staying with us through the break.
Fun.
So let's talk about this. You got the fiscal cliff coming up.
Yes, sir.
You're going to, a lot of thought out there, especially amongst economists, And, I'm not saying that all economists are right. I mean, you've got economists that have created some of this mess. But some of the smarter minds, like guys like Greenspan, a number of others are saying, if you got to pay a little higher taxes and go through a small recession with the fiscal cliff, it's not a bad way to get the government to stop the snowball of spending and send things back the other way. If that's true, it's going to make the guys that put this together last year look a lot smarter than they did when they came out of those discussions from the Republican side.
Well, George, I would argue that that our country really isn't overtaxed. We spend too much. But if they come out of this whole fiscal cliff, which has two parts. It's the tax part of it, but it's also the sequestration, the automatic budget cut part of it. And if you come out of this thing and you end up with some taxes going up, but you get the budget cuts out of the deal, there's worse outcomes that could occur. But the real problem, when you look at the numbers, and I'm not going to bore your listeners with a lot of numbers, but when you look at how much money we brought in 5 years ago, end of fiscal year 2007, at the end of this past fiscal year, our revenues are about $113 billion less than that. So we've got about $2.4 billion trillion in revenues. This past fiscal year, we had about $2.5 trillion. The last fiscal year 2007. But since that same time, our spending's gone up by $800 billion. So we've had an $800 billion spending splurge, and in the face of a recession, we had lower revenues coming in, but that's beginning to rebound a little bit. So the reality is on the tax side of things, we really don't have a lot of money we need to recover to get back up to where we were in 2007, which was the highest tax revenue collection in history. But to get back to the spending patterns, we need to make massive cuts to a bloated bureaucracy and not allow this government to set the $800 billion spending splurge as the new baseline. And that's really what the battle's about. And that's what we're fighting, is to try to make it so the spending side of it gets a proportionate cut, which would be 8-1 in terms of cuts to new taxes. And if you've been around this game anytime at all,
8-1. That's a huge number.
Yeah, that's the increased spending versus increased taxes. Remember, in 2007, we didn't run a budget. So we didn't run a balanced budget. We're a little over $100 billion. I think $160 billion budget deficit. Right now, this past fiscal year, we were $1.1 trillion budget deficit. So that's what you're really looking at.
That's the first time I've heard that figure, that the tax increases versus spending increases. Spending is 8 times what the tax increases are.
When you look at it
that's amazing to me.
Yeah, it is. It's a big number, and so everybody wants to talk about fixing things on the tax side. They're really missing the boat. We don't have a problem where it's a tax problem. We have a spending problem, and until we actually hunker down and deal with that reality, we are in fact dooming ourselves to $1 trillion deficits for as far as the eye can see.
So do you think this Congress has the grit to dig their heels in here and fight the White House on this tooth and nail?
We're doing everything we can to give them that grit. I think that this Congress is going to try to accommodate where they can and fight where they must. And part of the things we try to do here at Americans for Limited Government is to lay out in stark terms the fighting grounds and where they need to fight, and really lay down markers. For instance, one marker is that IRS funding and not having the IRS allowed to enforce the ObamaCare healthcare mandates from the federal level. That would have a huge impact on economic growth in those states which are refusing to have Obamacare, and would help out this country dramatically. And so
but here's the thing, Rick.
It
makes me very nervous to throw that into a court case, given the last time we were in the Supreme Court with an Obamacare decision, the kind of craziness we got.
George, I don't like it any more than you do. Mm-hmm. That is exactly right, and it'd be nice if we could eliminate the whole thing. The truth is, with the decisions made in the last election, we don't have that option. But we may have the option of being able to stop the funding of an overreach by the IRS, and fight a battle there and win it. And if that's the case, if you just go by what's in the statute, we win the court case. Now, they can do whatever they want to do. They're the court. But I'd rather give those states, the small businesses in those states that reject the state health care mandate, I'd rather give them the option and the ability to fight that, because those states which accept the state mandate have no ability to fight whatsoever, and leaves their businesses naked to being plundered by the federal government.
Well, let's just say that went through. We got a really liberal court, and somehow they upheld it. Even as ludicrous as that sounds, somehow they went ahead and upheld that would happen. If Congress pulled funding, how would that look?
Well, if Congress said to the IRS, you can't enforce this, that takes it out of the hands of the court, and essentially puts it. If the IRS then tries to enforce it, then the IRS, the executive branch, is in violation of a direct order by Congress. No, the court can't possibly uphold the executive branch's ability to do whatever they want to do and spend money however they want to spend. That's a fundamental principle of our democracy and our Constitution, and any second grader could read it and figure out how that has to be decided.
But what is the stickiness on the money? The thing's gone way over what was budgeted. What's the stickiness on if they just decide, next year not to give it as big a budget?
Well, and that would be a desirable outcome. I know that in the past 2 years, they've attempted to zero out the ObamaCare a number of times. The problem is when they attempt to zero out Obamacare, we end up in something called a continuing resolution. The government's going to go unfunded. We're going to have a major crash, and all sorts of calamities going to occur, and the government's going to shut down, and everybody gets all worried about it, and so they end up caving. I have little expectation that the House Republicans are going to be willing to battle to the point of saying, we'll accept the government shutdown, and as a result of that,
Obama's willing to battle that point, Rick. I mean, that's why he's winning.
Yes, he is, and he's willing to battle that because he knows the Republicans aren't, and it's a game of chicken. And 2 years ago, the Republicans swerved, and ever since then, they've had no leverage at the table.
I think Americans have taken such a beating over the last 4 years that what's another punch or two at this point.
Well, it may seem that way, but you can only take so many punches before you go down, and we've got to fight. I've had this conversation with a friend the other day, and the bottom line is we have to fight.
But let's just go back to I want to come back to your friend in a minute. Just hold that thought. I mean, one thing to say. I mean, it's not like we're thriving. You said it's one. I mean, this is a slow march. This is a decision of a slow march down or a quick hit, and maybe we go down fast and we can come back and rebound. What you were telling your friend the other day?
Well, we were talking about how do you deal with this situation, and my point of view is this, and this is American Limited Government's point of view. We've got to fight every inch of the way, and that means trying to hold those elected representatives accountable, giving them some backbone to fight for things, and provide them with winning things that they can do. Carve out some absurd spending that they can just point to, carve it out, and make it unacceptable to continue that spending. George, one thing that when I was doing this story for today that I found out that kind of surprised me, we actually, after all those threats of government shutdown and all that stuff over the last 2 years, we actually spent about $80 billion more in 2012 than we did in 2010. So with all this talk about we're cutting the size and scope of government, we spent more money.
Every year for a long time.
And
listen, Rick, I got to tell you, guys at America's for Limited Government are doing a great job at helping get back to our Constitution and really fighting to get back to free markets. I want to thank you so much for all you do for our country. Rick Manning, we sure appreciate you being on the show.
Appreciate it, George, and you do the same fight. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. We're finishing up the first hour of the George Jarkesy Show. Do not touch that dial. We'll be back for the second hour.